All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties. I want to welcome you to Germanna. My name is Brianna Lutterby, and I am the co-chair of the English department here at Germanna. Thank you so much for coming and enjoying this night of poetry with us. We have some wonderful speakers lined up. Then we'll have a short break, and then we will have our open mic night. So that's kind of the plan for the evening. So thank you again. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Beth.
Good evening. Again, I echo Brianna's welcome, and I want to be sure to thank our wonderful co-sponsors, Germanna Community College, and also the Poetry Society of Virginia, the North Central region, which is celebrating the centennial of the Poetry Society of Virginia from 1923 to 2023. You're encouraged to join the Poetry Society of Virginia, especially since the season of competitions is coming and members can enter the contests at no charge. So that's at www.poetrysocietyofvirginia.org if any of you are interested. I've also been asked to announce that the Central Rappahannock Regional Library is hosting the annual Writers Conference here at Germanna, again, thanks to Germanna's wonderful generosity. And that event is going to be Saturday, November the 5th from 8:45 to 5 p.m. And there are 3 tracks this year. There's an in-person track for adults, an in-person track for teens, and a virtual track for those of you that are going to be on the road or away. So you're encouraged to go to librarypoint.org to register for that. And it's free. You can't beat the price. A couple of housekeeping announcements. Restrooms are out the door to your left and then turn left again, go down the hall. And as always, please turn off your electronic devices. We're going to have each poet read for about 20 minutes, followed by a brief question and answer period following each poet's presentation. And then we'll have about a 15-minute break and then the open mic. You are welcome to chat with the poets during the break. And if you are so moved, you can purchase a book. So I invite you to chat with them during that time. We're going to first have Jenna Villforth Veazey read for us today. And Jenna writes from the tidal shores of Virginia. Her poetry has been published in the Fredericksburg Literary and Arts Review and is forthcoming in the Poetry Society of Virginia Centennial Anthology. She is the author of a chapbook of poems, The Rise of Jennifer, and her work has also appeared in Bella Grace magazine, Baby Bug magazine, and Highlights High Five. She is a Virginia master naturalist, and when she's not writing poems, she enjoys kayaking, backpacking, and nature journaling. And you can find her on Instagram at Jenna Villforth Veazey. So without further ado, let's welcome Jenna.
Hello. Thank you, Beth. Can everyone hear okay? All right. Whew. Well, I would like to thank you all for being here today. Thank you to those who are participating via Zoom. And I would also like to thank David Anthony Sam for inviting me to present here today. He is part of our local Poetry Society of Virginia North Central region. If you're not familiar with the Poetry Society of Virginia, Beth talked a little bit about it. I do encourage you to join. I think part of being a poet, finding community is so important. We write poems not just for ourselves, but also to share. And part of that sharing, finding your community and sharing with one another, whether it's doing something like this or in a small feedback group, or if it's putting together a book of poetry. It's all important part of being a poet and sharing. Poet Matthew Olsman said, if you can't find the community that you are looking for, you have to work to build it. And that really struck me. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna look for my community. And part of that search has led me to the Poetry Society of Virginia, which has led to a whole cascade of other opportunities, which has led me here to talk to you tonight. So I'm grateful for all of those. My first poem I'm going to share with you actually was inspired by another community that I belong with. I am a Virginia Master Naturalist. I'm part of the Central Rappahannock chapter. And as a part of our training, we get to go on fun little field trips. And this field trip was an owl prowl. It was at Caledon State Park, and we got to go at night. We went on a little bumpy hay wagon ride, and we had an expert master naturalist bird caller who was with us, and his job was to call in the owls. And so this poem was based on that experience. I will apologize in advance. I am making an owl call, and I am not as amazing at it as our expert guide, so bear with me. It's called In the Starlight Night We Looked. Necks cranked back, mouths parted, puffing clouds of steamy exhaust into the frigid night. Our guide calls, ooh, 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 ah, repeats. We listen. Our cheeks still sting from the wind whipping on the wagon ride to the middle of the forest, the silence hard to maintain. Bodies shift, bellies gurgle, coats wrinkle and rustle. He calls again, we listen. The stars are sharp sand, glittered across inky indigo. Only the trees stabbing upwards without their leaves look truly black. There are whispers now, hushed jokes about being stood up by nature. But after his next call, we hear a hoot back, then a flash of pale shadow flicker overhead. The barred owl answers, comes a little closer. He calls, the owl calls, flies to another branch. Repeat. We are enthralled. Our guide as magic as a snake charmer. Our silence is absolute. We want the magic to happen again. It never does. Thank you. This next poem I am reading in part for Mike Maggio. He and I had the pleasure of reading together as a part of the Poetry Society of Virginia's Virginia Voices series, which is put on by Kathy Haley and Angela Dribbin. It's a wonderful series. If you haven't heard of it, I urge you to check it out. It's all online. It's the second Wednesday of every month, and each month features two different poets from all across Virginia. It too is part of this Poetry Society of Virginia Centennial Celebration. So Mike and I were the featured poets for October, and then we got to do this together tonight. He and I were lamenting about traveling on I-95, and so this is for him and any of you who may also not love that piece of highway. Ode to I-95. I would like to decline your invitation to gridlock. Your high speed, brake slam, creep crawl, You are a connector, yet you keep people apart. You riddle you. Really, you're a thief of time, blind to our designs. Accountants, late for meetings. Patients, late for chemo. Me, late for my dying father's last breath. You giant snake, you multitude of hostile cherry eyes glowering, a constrictor choked by cranes, pavers, and pipes. As we wait our turn in the swollen belly of the beast, all of us here together in the belly of the beast. That is to say, me stuck here with all this time, and it's not enough. So part of a poetry community is not just writing at home, wherever it is, coffee shop, that you're inspired to write. As I mentioned, it's also sharing. And I have had the pleasure of learning from some wonderful performance poets and being inspired by them and realizing, oh, I'll probably never be able to do that. And that's okay. I don't have the never say never, but I don't have the memorization storage capacity that some of these amazing poets have. And this next poem sort of speaks to that. It's called, Let's Call Her My Archivist. I have concerns. What I mean is, I am worried for that lady behind the desk, standing, hair pulled in a bun so tight her hair's receded. Worried for how she quakes when a request is thrown her way, how her thin hands clutch at the imaginary heart here. Wonder if the cartwheeling red of her pulse, of her pause, is to collect time. I know how hard it is to gather the evidence, find the right files, present facts only to be given the demand for faster recall. Keep up, they seem to be saying, while casting back all the paperwork. Pale folders that release their pearly sheafs to the floor, roll around the desk, the chair at which she never sits. Again, they demand. She's barely swept the floor clean when a new set of leaves fall around her feet. I wonder, how much longer can we keep this machine going? This dog and pony show, this extended metaphor. I am told to mind my business, complete crosswords, swallow ginkgo, drink lion's mane. I dream of tiny facts that mushroom up through the debris, their fruit blooming like a carpet of velvet mouths, enough to satisfy all the roaming deer, the ones that so often freeze, light dazzled when faced with an oncoming question. There is a wonderful little festival down in Floyd, Virginia called the Little River Poetry Festival. Has anybody here heard of that? It's a lot of fun. It's a overnight. It involves, if you want, camping. There's actual kayaking and poetry involved on the Little River. There in Floyd. And I swear this was not a festival made just for me. Although when I read about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go. You don't actually have to camp. It's not a requirement. You can stay at any of the amazing little bed and breakfasts there. Happens every year, and it's encourage you to take a look at it. I think it's in June of every year. This next piece made its debut at the open mic there. It's called, and it's also where I like to give the disclaimer that not all poetry needs to be autobiographical. And its title came from social media. If you were in Mike Maggio's wonderful workshop earlier about collage poetry, he talked about how working with collage poems can help you with inspiration, overcome, move you through writer's block for one, but it's also just like a fun puzzle. And I happened to be scrolling through social media and looking at some of the weird things that were, I guess, targeted in my algorithm. I'm not really sure, but there's a poem in that. So the title comes from social media. Red flags, your partner might not be emotionally available. They don't smile when you tell them how nice they look today. They have no reply when you tell them you love them. They never respond. They never reply. They're dating someone else. They're married. They are in the Netflix series you binged in its entirety thrice, despite appearing only once in episode 4, season 3, because you are this kind of devoted. They are a K-pop star. They're a cat. They are a corner of filtered natural light filled with plants, the kind that vine and grow quickly, of which at first you are proud, but then they require support while they snake wildly up and down the shelf, visiting all the other plants, showing off a little, frankly, and calling it growth. You build them a makeshift trellis from takeout chopsticks and forks. It will not be good enough. You try taping their vines to the wall, the ceiling. Instead, they creep into your kitchen, see the sink full of unwashed cups, bowls, your vibrator, start chatting up the grocery store fern. They start to criticize your choice in light bulbs. You begin to eye the fake Monstera plant at Target. Imagine a life of ease, smoothing dust off the fake glossy leaves. Imagine a life in which you yourself might not be feeling emotionally available. This next one is called The Truth Lies Between Us. There are two stories of how we met. The one for our parents through friends of friends, and the other one. This is the story I tell myself. We met at that bar just in time. My mouth set to swallow my own tail, peacock scales strung on a string and sold for pearl money. You full of oxtail and oily magazines, scuba gear and spear, able to dive just deep enough to meet me halfway. You were not hunting for treasures per se, but found one you could trophy aboard and fit inside a steamer trunk. You yowling magician, you made me believe I could survive on nothing but air. I loved your lies like they were my own, sung them in my sleep. Dreamt we were man and wife with a home on a hill, 3 little children, a pony and gold buried by an ex. In truth, we were oil and water. But in this version of us, I don't know the meaning of immiscible. Only that story where one part dies to keep the other going. And who could be blamed for wanting this story to end there? Infable, infallible, eternal. Instead, our story, our flesh, made endlessly malleable, continues to meet each other anew, our minds, freshly washed blackboard, ready for the next incarnation. Thank you. You guys are so nice. All right. This next one appeared in the Fredericksburg Literary and Art Review back in 2015. It's an older one. And this one is called Things I Should Have Never Told You. You are not only made of stardust, ancient sea waters rise and fall in your veins. There are hieroglyphs carved into your bones. Burrowed inside are silent screams, stoppered like the ocean's whisper in a conch. Others people's madnesses crank the gears too tight. Breaking cogs, chips get embedded, and that scar tissue will form planets. Such madness is not all you. A paradox card dealt, the double-edged sword. But there's an answer key hidden under the rib meat. And all of this survives with you. All right, I have out on the back table there, a bunch of my little micro chaps. These were published by the Origami Poems Project, which is a wonderful nonprofit organization. You can go check out their website. It's origamipoemsproject.com. And they've got all sorts of poets. You can download their microchaps, all of it for free, which is amazing. So if you feel so moved, you can make a donation to the Origami Poems Project to keep the project going. But you can download and print out the microchap, and then they have wonderful directions on their website for how to fold it up into this little booklet. Don't be like me and think I could do that, because the first couple I butchered, and then I was like, oh, I'll follow the directions. Okay. But actually it's very easy to put it together. It's called Songs from the River. I do live off of the Potomac River, and we're right here by the Rappahannock, and very, very inspired by the river. Probably heard a lot of the water imagery in some of my poems. And so this one is a very local poem called Portrait of an Artist on the Rappahannock River. She watches the shad fitchers wading deep at Falmouth Flats, current pushing around them as they cast their lines, teasing, flies over the surface of the water. Single-minded and starved, the shad bite at everything, shiny, silvery flashes of scale and tail. Her brush tries to keep up, a fan and flash of sable. She too is focused and hungry, biting at everything. One of the other poems that is in here was actually a part of Louisa Agloria's, the Virginia Poet Laureate, I guess, emerita now. We do not currently have, to my knowledge, a poet laureate. So please let your governor know that they have failed to select one. That's a list of wonderful poets has been provided, and typically a new one is installed in July or the summer, and it's now middle of October. But Louisa Agloria put together, as part of her poet laureate tenure, a wonderful project called Poetry Postcards, in which she encouraged people to send her postcards from all over. She encouraged any kind of artwork or collage on the form of the postcard, and then some sort of statement of environment or where you were, some sort of locus. I am very fortunate in that I live right near the river. I can see the river. There is a beautiful, beautiful oak tree that I've been watching over the years. And one of my very favorite things to do is to keep track of when the osprey come in the spring. We have bald eagles there basically as our backyard bird, which is just so amazing. But when the ospreys come, almost to the day of right before St. Patrick's Day, there's these great aerial battles between the osprey and the eagles as they kind of navigate this new seasonal time of territory. The osprey will eventually settle in on their nests along the platforms on the river, and the eagles, they kind of cede their territory, fishing territory for the breeding time. And then around fall, the ospreys have moved on, they've raised their babies, and the eagles come back to that same oak tree. It's really pretty incredible. So this one that I wrote to her speaks to the springtime, early spring, just before St. Patrick's Day. And it's called Dear Chestnut Oak. Do not dive into the river just yet. I need the flickers in your hair one more season. I'm greedy for eagles, their bait and tease, hooking mates with stick or fish. See how the wind blows warmer, the morning's light, a welcome peekaboo. Soon the ospreys will move in. You, judge and jury, also the prize. Nothing is fair. Let me stay rooted with you a little longer. So before I read this next one, I want to talk a little bit about my open mic opportunity here locally at Highmark Brewery. I put a flyer out on the back table. It is every first Tuesday. So the next one will be November 1st. The signups start at 6:45 and the mic gets turned on at 7. We would love to see anybody there. Come share your poems or share a favorite poem. Just credit who you're reading. And we would love to hear from you and have you added to our group, our community. And I was at the Little River Poetry Festival. I got to meet Nathan Richardson, who is an amazing, not just an amazing poet, but he is an amazing orator. He actually is a reenactor of Frederick Douglass, and he's got a beautiful voice to listen to. But thinking about, finding community and not giving up, one of his little short t-shirt, he calls it t-shirt poetry. He has a whole chapbook about it, but it's the widest river begins with one persistent, narrow little stream. And so I kind of see this open mic as like my little narrow persistent stream for finding my people. So that's my bid to get people out to read. And this is my open mic poem and my last poem. Open invitation. Come, shout me your confetti. Sing me your shiny gold heart. I want to splash you giddy in opaline puddles. Put down your umbrella. We only sprinkle love here. It sheets in velvet, soft and smooth. You remember, don't you, what it's like to be the one blowing candles on the cake, to receive the first slice, to get the corner piece, to be hoisted high on everyone's esteem and paraded around while love's spirit paper money into your pockets. Write ballads in your honor. Be told over and over again how you're necessary as the sun. No matter. Here, come, I have saved you a seat. The party's about to start. You are the guest of honor today. I will engrave you to the moon. carve a multitude of blessings into the long river that is your life. You loveling, you sweet, come here. I've got you. Thank you. And I guess I'm here for any questions anyone may have. Beth will pass around.
For Jenna, just raise your hand and I'll be glad to bring you the mic. She's left you speechless. Oh, wait, we have one question.
How did you find out about these different open mics, like the one here and then the one in Floyd you went to, and the different
Really
ones?
good question. Some of it was honestly joining Poetry Society of Virginia. Some of it was once I started following pages and people on Facebook, on Instagram, opportunities began to bubble up. It's hard finding community, and sometimes I'm like, where are my poets at? Like, I know we're here. Where are you? So we're here. We're in here. Yeah. So I would start with the big organization and follow people and find out that way. Hopefully that answered your question. Anybody else?
Steve, did you have a question?
Is everyone here a writer of some sort, poetry or other? No. Yes. You don't count over there. Brought some of my own community.
Any other questions for Jenna?
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being
Thank
here to
you.
listen.
All right. Our next poet is Mike Maggio. And Mike was a 2020 nominee for the Virginia Poet Laureate. He has published fiction, poetry reviews, and Arabic translations in journals and anthologies in the United States and abroad. He is the author of Your Secret is Safe with Me, an audio collection of poems by Black Bear Publications, Oranges from Palestine, and Other Poems by Mardi Gras Press, 2 collections of short fiction, Sifting Through the Madness by Ex Libris and The Keepers, March Street Press, and a full-length collection, Poetry Democracy by Plainview Press. His latest collection, Let's Call It Paradise, was released this year by San Francisco Bay Press. Please join me in welcoming Mike Maggio.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Brianna and Germanna College for having us. Can everybody hear me on this mic? Mic on the mic. And thank you all for coming. I'm going to read from my new book, which is this. But before I do that, and I'm going to give you some grounding in what this is all about. If you came to my workshop, you have an idea. But before I do that, I'm going to read 2 newer poems. The first one is called Lament on a Baked Fish. I thought it was a serious poem, but when I read it at an open mic, everybody was laughing. So I knew it was humorous. I didn't think it was that humorous, but so it's both humorous and serious. So Lament on a Baked Fish. My dear friend, why so glum? Why stare at me with such angry eye? It's not as if it was I who murdered you, angled you in with my artful intent, or that I look upon you with disdain or deceit. You lie there on your plate of gold, so silvery fine, nestled between yellow and green, your scales as shiny as if you were still alive. A masterful portrait, fit for the Louvre or some Fifth Avenue gallery, for all to admire and revere. Had you not been lured to your fate, had you not been hooked by temptation, perhaps we would not have met. You could have swum away, proud mackerel, pleasured some scintillating female, instead of lying here unwilling to now pleasure me. My dear friend, let's not quibble about circumstance. Let us not regret the future. Let us revel in the sublime moment, one man and one fortunate fish, whose savory destiny has come at last. So you guys didn't laugh. So did you think it was funny or was it serious? Both, okay. All right, well, I'm gonna do Jenna the favor. This poem is for her. She's a master naturalist. I'm not, but I like birds. And I was sitting in my garden one day watching birds, and this poem, I was inspired for this poem. It's called The Sun Rising. If you know John Donne, there is a poem, his poem, the poem, called The Sun Rising. So there is a little bit of metaphysics here, and a lot of nature for Jenna. The Sun Rising. Busy old birds, boisterous, unruly creatures, bantering behind leaf and branch. What brings you to my humble garden? Is it the morning worm you've come to fetch? Or could it be the evening's tryst of which you boast, still flush in your ruffled feathers, from which you now take your leave? Maybe it's the scent of magnolias that draws you here, or perhaps the peonies, their fragrance so fresh, so intoxicating that tempt you, lure you to my worldly wayward wood. I watch you, coy souls, angels of the morning, sonorous on this pristine dawn, darting about from limb to limb, gambling in playful jest, while I sit here down below and wonder of life's marvels, of plant and beast and sun and soil. Here the ants march in singular form. The spider weaves her artful trap. The fox lurks, the chipmunks chitter, and we sit and slake our slumbered senses while the trees blind us from the rising sun. But you, elusive creatures, ascend to the morning sky. When the rain falls, you take flight. And when the wind howls, you ride its mighty crest, glide gracefully through the ethers, rise up, up, way up, a mere speck on the endless horizon, eclipsed by the blush of the rising sun. And of course here's the second page. Oh, radiant creatures, oh, hallowed beings seeking the soothing solace of dawn, let the sunburst bathe you in its golden rays. Let life's mysteries imbue you with song. Let the aurora, that glorious, miraculous mirage, sustain you, guide you to your lofty destination, so that we, in our mortal moments, may learn to perceive the light. So, as Beth said, this is my new book, came out in January. It's called Let's Call It Paradise. And it is mostly, not totally, but mostly a book of collage poems. What I set out to do was to look at our society, to get a picture of what our society is at this moment. And I did that through looking at magazines such as Vogue and Marie Claire and People, looking at other kinds of texts, looking at spam messages, looking through the internet, doing Google searches. I mean, I did all kinds of crazy things over about a span of, I think, 4 to 5 years. And so I came up with this book. It's mostly collage. There's some visual. This is a visual poem. And this is actually a poem made up from a log file from a computer. Oh, I forgot. Do you guys know what Linux is? So there is Linux in this book. So there's all kind, like I said, it's all kind of stuff. So there are some visual poems, some collage poems, some regular poems that are not collage at all. And so that's what this is about. And I'm going to read some of them. I'm going to start off with the first one, which is called Siren Song. And you will hear immediately T.S. Eliot. That's all I'll say. But it is Siren Song, and I'm assuming that everybody knows who or what the sirens were. Everybody's clear? Everybody knows they're Greek? Okay, so Siren Song. Come, let us go now. T.S. Eliot, right? Come, let us go now to a place beyond dreams. Let us arise and go now through the fond, murmuring streets, through the blind, stuttering boulevards, where siren song stills the air, where the minute's wheels wend our way to that elusive, rapturous bliss. Let us rush now, you and I, like the honeybee to its hive, to the merry, manic marmalade malls, to the towering halls of dithering tongues, to the glittering temples that mesmerize all, where those who seek know not what they crave, yet surrender to pipe and drum and sweet serenade. There in short shrift shall we find our solace, there cast-offs to shores of grief and joy, like ghosts, like waves dashed upon rock, will covet, I've lost my space, will drift past glimmering galleons, covet the treasures of shipwrecked men, grope for beads, for baubles and gems, while all the while we sink and swim, swim and sink, and the siren song sweetly scuttles our unsolaced souls. Come quickly now, submit at once to this hasty urge. Not greed nor grail shall accept one dram, nor glass render reason, nor brass surrender seasons we cannot escape. Let gold and silver release their clasp. Let gold and silver release their grasp, and jewels their hapless, jaded clasp. Yet snow shall not discharge, nor rain postpone the swift completion of our sacred rounds. Hurry now, Rise up, let serendipity trumpet the way. Let us in full fanfare not delay. Let desire draw us from these transient, abandoned alleys to the splendid golden valleys, where tree and grass defy the sky, where silken flowers in concrete lie. Let spouse nor child obstruct the way. The time has come to submit and pay. So that's the invitation to the book. Hopefully it draws the reader in and gets them, grounded in the fact that this is a book about society, about our consumerist society. You probably noticed that there's a lot of rhyme in that poem. I don't normally work with rhyme. I'm known in Washington, D.C. as the rhyme hater. And there are reasons why I don't work with rhyme or don't like rhyme. However, this next poem is completely rhymed. I had a fight with it. It wanted to rhyme. I didn't want it to rhyme. And then finally I said, the hell with it. You want to rhyme? Go ahead. So it's called Hair. It's made up of mostly of words and phrases from ads, magazine ads. So my rhyming poem, Hair. Let's talk about hair. 15-hour wear without a tussle or a tear. Sometimes you just don't spare. Light and dreamy as air, through rain, sweat, and glare. Even through your wildest affairs, some things you just don't share. Time to remove the nair in downtown Buenos Aires. It's simply there, right straight through that frizzed up scare. So please don't stop and stare, or curl up, or otherwise care. It's nothing more than Matt Lumiere getting down right here in Times Square. So here's an interesting one from text that I got out of the Washington Post. It was an ad for some Israeli antiquities thing that they found these ancient coins called widow's mites. Anybody know what widow's mites are? You know what are widow's mites? Little tiny coins that apparently Jesus Christ gave to a widow because she was a widow and she needed money, and they became famous. And of course, they were for sale. So this is called When Jesus Praised a Widow. When Jesus praised a widow, a coin out of history was born. A story out of the Bible was a coin out of the Holy Land. A 2,000-year money-backed guarantee was born. Widow's mites, hand-struck, hand-manufactured, handed down, hand to hand. When you hold one, you're touching the hands of the apostles. When you're touching a hand-struck widow, you're touching a coin that passed through the middle of Jesus and the apostles, passed through the hands of time, a coin out of the Holy Land. You are touching a coin made of history through our direct connections to history, to a history of historic proportions. Don't miss this historic opportunity. Don't wait another 2,000 years. Don't wait another amazing risk-free Opportunity might never come. Another might never come again. Another two widows for the price of one might never. That's why one widow's mites are among the mightiest mites collectors have ever coveted, have ever collectivated. Call now, order guaranteed. Call toll free, order 3, order the complete set for risk free. Only $59.95 plus shipping fee. Order more mites on a mighty spree, a once in a lifetime shot at eternity, more than 2,000 years of religious opportunity. And the thing that you don't get, so part of this book is you really have to read it, not just hear it. The thing that you don't get with this poem is that I'm using the word might, which is M-I-T-E, which is the widow's mite, and the word might, M-I-G-H-T, and I keep switching them around, so you don't really know which might is might. Anyhow, let's see what else I want to read. Oh, here's a good one. Stir-fried breadcrumbs. So I took this, I took a recipe. I went on the internet, of course, and I looked up some personal ads. So I took some personal ads and I took this recipe, and I also had a piece of a shopping list in my coat pocket. So I took all that stuff and I collaged it together and I came up with this poem. It's called Stir-Fried Breadcrumbs. I kept asking myself, should I really do this? Stir-fried breadcrumbs in a skillet for 12 minutes? After all, I'm warm and sensitive, and besides, without your minced words, well, I need someone to raise the heat a bit, someone random and spontaneous and easy to get along with. So on Saturday morning, after waking up dead, I went to the store. Now, as you know, life is short, so I purchased 8 pounds of ground beef, 11 pounds of lamb cubes, and 18 pounds of whole turkey. When I returned home, it was 10 o'clock. I could tell because I'm a good listener. So after marinating all day, I figured, why not give this a try? So at exactly 5 p.m. on January 29th, 2006, in the year of our discord, I immediately set the meat aside and began adding oil to the wok. I stir-fried a gaggle of garlic cloves. Every now and then, I would add onions, shallots, parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, anything I could find just to show that I can be a true friend. Then I remembered your reserved brown eyes, your easy frame, and your 50 pairs of sexy shoes. And I knew it was time to add the breadcrumbs. Well, you know, I struggle with this town, and women really are a different breed of person. Sorry about that, but that's what it said. My job keeps me busy, and I'm always sitting in traffic. I just like to be with someone who's non-judgmental, translucent, someone I can love and figure out, not just strain off and set aside as optional. So there you have it, the encapsulation of my existence. 1 leftover tablespoon of tomato paste, a pan full of burnt breadcrumbs, and a missing sprig of coriander leaves. Now, what do you say? Let's lower the heat and simmer for a while. And if you still like to laugh and eat and find my ingredients suitable to your taste, come on back and let's see what happens. So I told you guys this would be fun, right? Okay. In vogue. And this actually was in vogue. Her scandalous past was revealed, cheating at last again, just weeks after completing sex rehab. The chemistry took a private turn, a short jump landing her into a hornet's nest of hominid hanky-panky. I have come to treat this like an elusive family member, she said. Here I am a woman, but not the right kind, affected by obesity, every organ impacted by obesity, a double standard approved by right-wing extremists, imprimatur by white-wing extremists. So she took to Twitter. She cradled an adorable baby while canoeing. She hung unflinchingly with a handsome, blonde-haired man, huge, brave, not your typical scribble-scrabble, not your usual mishmash. It was no ordinary family outing. There was the customary dilation. There were feats of unbridled abortion. There was contraction and extraction, and through it all, a relationship that appeared and disappeared. Which leads me to my impoverished shape, my naked heart, my 25-year-old matter of sacred amusement. We don't need more bakeries. We don't need more bread and pastry. We don't need more mini burgers and galas galore. We need soup. We need organic seasonal foods. We need bowls of raisins seasoned with recycled honey. We need a Vogue moment in which to advocate a word for evaluating treatment. So I'm just flipping through this, see what I'm going to do. This is an interesting one. Of course, when I do this kind of stuff, it's not just taking, it's also giving. I use my imagination. But this one got me. It's called dysphoric. I get confused about dysphoria, she said to her PDoc. I understand it to be mania in the form of anger, agitation. She was sitting in the chair, crying because something had died inside. That's just mania, the PDoc answered. We don't live in such a world now, do we? Okay, so we're all tired of hearing all those commercials on TV for Q Logic or whatever it's called, Qpixent, and all those other drugs that they're trying to get us to buy, or at least get our doctors to prescribe. So you'll notice that this is a parody on all of that. However, it's called mouse therapy, and actually this is a real thing, or at least not the way I wrote it, but there is something called mouse therapy out there that I found on the internet. So mouse therapy. You may wonder sometimes, is mouse therapy right for me? After all, human anti-mouse antibodies have been linked to extreme fluctuations in blood pressure. This may relieve symptoms at times, but then this is a no one-size-fits-all therapy. How does the literature account for this? How do researchers distinguish between normal rodent colonization and rodent radicalization? Some scientists look at this like an electrical switch. One is on, zero is off. The chicken or the egg, your money or your life. So what is the most important information I need to know? Is mouse-based therapy right for everyone? What are the risks? Are there any alternatives? Did I do something wrong? Why me? Rest assured, you're not alone. 1.1% of patients, 9% of sufferers, 55% of respondents, 80% of those surveyed, 99.9% of most people have the same questions. So ask your doctor if mouse-based therapy is right for you. If you plan on having mouse-based therapy, or if mouse-based therapy is something you wish to explore, seek a medical opinion first. Don't engage in mouse-based therapy if you have a serious allergic reaction to mice, a serious rodent problem, a cat. The most common side effects of mouse-based therapy are nocturnal gnawing, diurnal droppings, cheese cravings, rapid reproduction, infestation, fear of cats. Some people are prone to mouse-like symptoms after having mouse-based therapy. For more information, see your healthcare provider or visit our website, because a mouse is a terrible thing to waste. So I'll read a couple of more, and then I will disappear. This is a very old poem. I mean, really old, like from the 80s. And it's not really a collage poem either. It's called A Guide to the Signposts in the Garden of Eden. 1. You are now entering the Garden of Eden. Fig leaves required past this point. 2. The management reserves the right to refuse admission to anyone. 3. Garden of Eden apples may be unsuitable for young children. Parental discretion is advised. 4. Warning, the tree of knowledge may be hazardous to your health. Pick at your own risk. 5. Please do not feed or annoy the snakes. 6. Only you can prevent hellfire. 7. Adam and Eve slept here. 8. Don't make me laugh. 8. Create your own original sin. For more information, call 1-800-666-EDEN. 9. The management is not responsible for lost souls. 10. You are now leaving the Garden of Eden. We hope you have enjoyed your visit. Steep descent ahead. Please watch your step as you exit. Okay, I'll read this last one, because I think my 20 minutes are up, right? So this is called Glottal Stop poem. Anybody know what a glottal stop is? Beth? It's a linguistic term, yes. So right here is your glottis, AKA Adam's apple. And it is used in speech. So if you have a word like kitten, how do you spell kitten? Anybody? K-I-T-T-E-N? Do you hear the T in there? No, because the rule of our language turns those double T's into a glottal stop. So when you say kitten, you're using your glottis. And so behind all that is that when you pronounce any vowel as a not in the middle of a word, but as an initial part of the word, you're using your glottis. So if you say A or E or any vowel except Y, you're using your glottis, right? So this is called glottal stop poem, because I wanted to write a poem in which every word of the poem began with a vowel. I probably should have called it a vowel poem, but I was trying to use my linguistic knowledge. So glottal stop poem. So this is another one of those collected, I collected all these words that began with vowels, and then I collaged them together. If only Eddie and Irene at once ejected all our emerald apples, and oh, Eddie and Irene, an electronic automobile, unoccupied except Eddie and Irene, accelerating, away, away, Eddie and Irene and us abandoned on our asses. Isn't it ironic? After all our esteemed arguments, after all our extreme opinions, Eddie and Irene eating all our appetizing apples, accelerating away and away, offering us enough of an inkling, only after accelerating alacritous and away. Oh, audacious Eddie and Irene ingesting all our expensive apples. Eddie and Irene, oh, and us, eventually unable in our anger, unable and unalert, I and us abandoned altogether on our extremely unathletic asses. Thank you. So I'm supposed to stay here?
Thank you so much, Mike.
No questions about mouse therapy? Okay,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I have the pleasure of introducing our next poet. Elizabeth Spencer, I should have asked you how to pronounce your last name. Spragins, thank you, is a fiber artist, writer, and poet who taught in North Carolina community colleges for more than a decade before returning to her home state of Virginia. Her work has appeared in more than 80 journals and anthologies in 11 countries. She is the author of 3 original poetry collections, Waltzing with Water, and With No Bridle for the Breeze, and The Language of Bones. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Brianna, and on behalf of Germanna Community College, I'm going to read, to start, 2 poems from Dr. David Anthony Sam's collection, Writing the Significant Soil. Since Dr. Sam could not be here with us tonight, I agreed to be his voice at the beginning of my time. So we'll start with his introductory poem to the collection called Auguries of Ashes. I speak the ashes and the water, making ink from what has burned and what has flowed downhill. My text is the mulch of leaves and the desiccated fur of fox corpse along the broken highway. Please read no hopelessness in the suffering of what has passed. No life is lost in decomposition. The pieces of atoms are eternal, drifting into being and non-being as easily as the sunlight sprays across the morning dew, and just as easily across the red landscape at the end of yet another day. My fingers are wet and stained black with the making of moments into the tomb of cool memory. Please read no meaning into such peering at auguries of nothing. And the next poem from Dr. Sam's collection, The Language of Rain. Rain speaks, its utterances, the spattering against the mud, the meat sizzle in dry leaves, the crystalline descent of ice, the roar of torrent and lash against the fragile window glass, the slop of falling water into the sudden unstillness of receptive lake. As I am unstill myself, I cannot speak the rain, though I try, as clouds unform, reform above me in that wilderness of sky where amorphous canyons mass from unquiet air, sated on unseen drifts of water to fall in language beyond word, but heard by silent ear. Thank you. So now I'll read you a few of my poems, and I'll start with a few tanka. These are little Japanese style poems, and the tanka form predated the haiku, which many of you know. The tanka has 5 lines with a pivot line in the middle. And as with haiku, they are traditionally not titled, but I like to break the rules. So I put titles on mine. This first one is entitled Honeycomb, and it's from my book, With No Bridle for the Breeze. The fragrance of fall drifts on tides of tangled grass. A sea of thistles hums with honey song of bees that comb the waves of nectar. This one is entitled Racing the Day. When my vessel leaps and canters through the currents, wind song fills my sails with laments of buoy bells. I taste the salt of twilight. Thank you. How many of you have had your travel curtailed or disrupted during the past few years? Oh, yes, it's unanimous. Well, I'll remedy that with a few quick poetic trips. This one is Following the Moon. An unpainted sky pales to gradients of gray. The moon veils her face and glides on silver slippers into frosted highland hills. That's set in Glencoe, Scotland. This next one is set in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Facets. Black velvet cradles, diamonds pressed from darkness. Jewel box of stars blazes in the silent cold with dreams adrift on night skies. I'll shift gears now and share a few of my bardic verse poems. These are, for the most part, written in traditional Welsh bardic forms. The Welsh have taken poetry competition to a new level. They have what we might consider the Olympics of poetry every year, the Eisteddfod, and they coined the word bardd, B-A-R-D-D, prior to 100 BCE. Every noble house in Wales had its own personal bardd until the 16th century. And they competed, of course, noble houses had to compete. So they competed in competitions that had strict structural requirements. And these were codified into 24 official meters in the 14th century. And so I have tried to use some of those meters in modern language and tell some of the stories that the landscape would tell if it could speak, if you go from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so the first poem in my book, The Language of Bones, is of course set in Jamestown, Virginia. And it's entitled Jane. And it's based on a historic event that's actually rather disconcerting. In 2012, the archaeologists in that area discovered the mutilated skeleton of a young girl in the debris of a James Fort cellar. And there are no records of her identity, so the researchers named her Jane. And her remains provided physical evidence that the Jamestown colonists resorted to cannibalism during the horrible winter of 1609-1610, which you are probably familiar with as the starving time. A couple of historic notes. The Virginia Company of London recruited labor for the Jamestown colony by providing passage to immigrants who signed indentured servitude contracts. And you're going to meet a moccasin in this poem, and that's not the footwear, it's the venomous semi-aquatic snake that is found in the southeast of the US. And you're going to hear a word that may not be familiar to you, a linn, L-I-N-N, is a pool beneath a waterfall. So this is Jane. The hunger pads on restless paws and probes the palisade for flaws. Jaws devour the gate barred thrice. Then hunger hews my flesh from bone and gnaws my name from graveless stone, hones the blade of sacrifice that hovers over every head. We dine on horror, drink our dread, bury dead in snow and ice. My eyes are lifeless, yet I laid the table as my mistress bade. Debts are paid, a meal my price. But guests I fed will never dare to meet my disembodied stare. Fasting prayer can nourish vice. The dark without, the dark within. The deadly fangs of moccasin taint the linn of paradise. Thank you. This next one was inspired in response to several local programs about the slaves who crossed the Rappahannock River during the Civil War to obtain their freedom. In 1862, Union troops in Stafford County were camped opposite Fredericksburg. And if the slaves could manage to get across the river, they could then achieve their freedom. This one is entitled Holy Grail. You'll hear a reference to St. Francis of Assisi, who is, of course, known as the patron saint of animals. Holy Grail. The statue of St. Francis stands with placid smile and quiet hands beneath a scarred birch where supplicants perch, a quaint church on torn lands. Thick ivy clings to graves and grows untended over stones in rows. A blanket of moss has softened love's loss on each cross, weathered prose. A furtive form, a runaway, collapses wounded on the clay where merciful dead lie restless in bed. Weak with dread, gnarled hands pray. He pants despite the twilight's chill, then hears above the whippoorwill a heart-stopping sound, the bay of a hound. Face to ground, he lies still. A rabbit at the statue's base takes flight downhill. The dogs give chase. A lone overseer rides hard at the rear, passes near, sees no trace. The hunted flees his hiding place for Rappahannock's swift embrace. Once captive, now free. He mulls mystery on bent knee, whispers grace. Thank you. We have such beautiful fall colors coming around the streets in Fredericksburg and on the Germanna campus. I'll read a couple of tanka that honor the beautiful season. This one is entitled Hope. Frosted maple leaves cup cinders of the sunset. A shower of sparks thrown to earth by shooting stars lights the tapers of my dreams. And I don't know about you, but my car had frost on it this morning. The cold weather is definitely coming. This one is a prelude to that ice that we will no doubt see. It's entitled Icicle Harps. When frozen strings snap and music melts at morning, the wind holds her harp against an oaken shoulder and rests her weary fingers. Thank you. We'll shift back to a few final bardic verse pieces. This one is set in Grand Canyon, Arizona. Any of you been there? All right, you know exactly what this scenery looks like. I wrote this in response to a legend that I heard when I was there. During daylight hours, differences in the temperature at the canyon generate air currents, and local lore holds that at nightfall, when warm air rises and cooler air sinks for the final time, the canyon breathes its last breath of the day. So this one is Songs of the Southern Rim. Quiet calls from the corners of these walls as a frosted sun descends and lends flame to painted halls. Raven wings whisper when the canyon sings lullabies of lavender on her harp of pinon strings. Grace note soars, condors row on silent oars, ferry cargo of my dreams over streams to heaven's shores as dusk falls. One last breath. The warm wind stalls just before the daylight dies. Red rock sighs and quiet calls. Thank you. This next one is set in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in the Garden of the Gods. And according to Native American legends, the massive rock formations of the Garden of the Gods are the remains of giants and their terrible beasts. And when these beings threatened to devour the earth, the chosen ones prayed to the Manitou, who turned the invaders to stone. And Manitou is an Algonquin term for the spiritual force that controls nature. And you'll hear the word weather gleam, which may be unfamiliar to you. That's light or clear sky at the horizon. the garden of the gods. When storm clouds hid the Manitou, they cloaked invaders from his view, giants who engendered fright with fearsome height and thundered tread. Their horrid creatures ran ahead, kindled dread and panicked flight. Before their jaws devoured the land, a shaman knelt upon the sand and raised a hand towards sacred height. He chanted prayers and pleas for grace, implored the god to show his face and embrace the giant's might. The clouds dispersed, the spirits spoke. The hostile race stood still as oak, scorched by smoke that shuddered sight and burned their bodies into stone. The wind now whittles flesh from bone, carves a throne where kestrels light, as vestiges of day unseem within the vortex of a dream, weather gleam forestalls the night. Thank you. Well, we're coming up on Halloween. So by popular request, I have to tell you a ghost story. How many of you have been to Chatham Manor? Oh yes, most of you. Local legend holds that when he was a guest at Chatham Manor, George Washington, you had to know George Washington was there. He's all over Fredericksburg. George Washington intercepted a young lady in the act of eloping with a dry salter. And her father expected an alliance with somebody of a higher social station. And so when she was intercepted, she was forced to return to England, where she made a more suitable marriage. But she never forgot her lost love. And the heartbroken lady in white supposedly still walks the grounds of Chatham every 7 years on the anniversary of her death. So, quick costume change. The tryst. A spirit wanders Chatham's height on slippered feet that neither light nor linger when her shrouded passions stir. June thunder rends the night that cloaks her journey to the dock. When lightning forks her wedding frock, illumines the slope and plans to elope. Laddered rope, thwarted lock. In life she loved beneath her sphere, but servants held her honor dear, and she was betrayed. Her vows were unmade, love was laid to rest here. With bitter heart and broken will, she sailed, distraught, for London's chill. At death, she defied the knots on her tide. Dressed as bride, she walks still. Thank you. And we have to end the night on a light note, or the formal reading portion. Again, by popular demand, this is to all of you who have been owned by a cat. Yes, there are quite a few of you out there. This one is entitled To Roar. In feline dreams, a hot sun gleams and forest teems with fur and fowl. As green eyes gaze at logs that blaze, this tiger slays the great horned owl that calls each night from hemlock's height and then takes flight in feathered cowl and tufted hat. A touch, a pat, once more meerkat with timid growl. The embers die and daydreams fly on clouds too high to stalk or prowl. Thank you. So I'll answer any questions if anybody has any. thoughts they'd like to share? Yes, Mike. They're all different. um, the last one is for me the easiest one to write. Most of the bardic forms they have strict syllable counts, and that one has identical counts per line and just end rhyme. Some of the earlier ones that I read have varying syllabic controls, and there are cross rhymes within the lines. And in some cases, the rhyme pattern changes from stanza to stanza, but they're all incredibly different. So I would learn one and think I had mastered it, and then I'd try another one, and it was like going back to kindergarten. It's like start all over. The patterns to me are very difficult to do because they're so different from iambic pentameter or the traditional rhymed and metrical forms that we study in English. So yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I didn't hear that last part. I haven't read the novel, but I don't know if there's a connection. Yeah. The docents at Chatham Manor who have mentioned this legend to me have never mentioned any novels, but even if there were a connection, they probably wouldn't want to say it because they own the Lady in White. Yes. I've never seen her. I don't think they've ever seen her either. Other questions? Okay, we'll take about a 15-minute break. So that'll put us back here at about 5 to 8 by that clock. If you would like to purchase Mike's books, he'll have some out there for you to buy. And I brought a few. If you are interested, I just packed some at the last minute. If you would like to read in the open mic, please sign up on the sheet that's at the table at the door. We'd love to have as many readers as we can. And if you're in one of Dr. Sam's classes, please be sure to sign the sheet so that we give you credit for being here tonight. So I'll see you back here at about 5 to 8. Thank you.